For me, my testimony began in Ohio, where I was born, and up until the age of 5 when we moved up to Hillman. So in Ohio, about the age of 3, back to my remembrance, I started having some sexual abuse happen to me, and it was by a family member, my great-grandfather. And at that age, you really don't know what's happening. You just are there and you're part of what's going on. And you don't think there's anything wrong with it. You're too young to understand all that. So I really didn't understand until I got older that at that point in time, I had lost innocence. I had lost childhood. I had lost so much in that point in time. And so it became a very stressful time for me as I got older. We moved to Hillman when I was 5, and I really think that at that point in time that I was able to live some kind of normalcy. I can remember playing more and interacting, but still always feeling like maybe there was something different. And then I'm not even quite sure how old, possibly about 8 years of age, my parents chose to move our great-grandfather up with us. And I didn't know why, but at that point in time, things started to become an issue. I noticed that my behavior became very defensive. I became anxious whenever he was around, and I started remembering things and seeing things and vivid pictures of abuse happening to me. And so the anger built, the frustration built. Needless to say, I probably was not very nice at all to my parents, because for one, I'm like, why are you moving someone in? Why is he here with us? Protection mode kicked in, not only for myself, but also for my siblings, wanting to be able to shelter them from anything happening, not knowing if something had already happened. It was just crazy. I can remember being so angry at one time, trying to set the table for him to join us and slamming his silverware down. There's just overwhelming emotions when that happens. And in my teen years, I became promiscuous. I had early teen relationships, not sexually, but just interacting inappropriately to a certain point, and just bouncing from one to the next, to the next, to the next, always looking to figure out where I fit in, where did love come into the picture. You know, how was I supposed to act for love? It was at times like numbing. You just kind of went through the motion of growing up. I had started dating more seriously at the age of 15. I ended up pregnant at the age of 17. And about 2 months into that, I lost a child. I think I really didn't. It's like I wanted to become pregnant. I wanted something to take care of. I wanted something to be able to love that maybe would eventually give me back something that was real in return. So when I lost the baby, there was a lot of very hardship there too as well, but you go on. And I ended up marrying that man, and we ended up having 3 wonderful children together. There's no doubt that they were a blessing to me, although in my frame of mind, I didn't understand that or realize that at the time. But I still had problems. I had problems relating to him. I had problems with just going through life without flashbacks, without bad dreams, without you can smell things, you can hear things, the sounds kind of trigger things, and so we had a lot of issues. from my point, what I went through issues. Plus we had other issues. We lived from shut-offs. We moved a lot. I never was feeling secure. I never had what I felt to be true protection, and never really felt truly taken care of. So I was drinking. I would go through bouts where I would drink a lot for a long period of time, and then I would stop, and I would feel like maybe I was able to get myself under control again, and then it would start again, and I could spend weekend at the bar, easy, come in at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, not care. I was on a bad roller coaster. There was so much that had built. And even looking back and trying to talk with my parents a little bit, it was always like they didn't know how to deal with it either, you know. So it kind of got pushed aside. The first time I really told an adult was my junior high, 7th, 8th grade. It was health teacher. We had health class, and she addressed the subject. If anybody needs to talk about it or release that information, meet me here in the locker room. And there was me and 2 other girls, and it was like, that was the first time I felt like I wasn't really alone. But then we weren't given counsel. We weren't given help. It was just acknowledged. And, you know, I feel bad for you, and but that was it. So for me, I never really went through counseling. Well, going through being married and my kids growing up and being overprotective with them, finally, with the roller coaster of drinking and all that, I came to a point where I'd had enough. I had enough with the way my life was with my marriage. I had enough with the way I was acting and carrying on. And it was a realization that something had to change, because I was at a breaking point where I think I was going to have a nervous breakdown. So I was up in my bedroom, and the tears are rolling down, and I can just remember saying, Lord, why? Why can't I find somebody to take care of me, care for me, protect me, make me feel secure? And it's like, why? Something happened at that moment. It was a turning point for me. It was a realization that I needed to take care of this. I needed to deal with this. I needed to not push it underneath the rug anymore, so to speak. That my marriage was falling apart. My kids didn't even have a mom half the time. And so there began a change in my whole demeanor and my atmosphere. Not saying I was perfect after that, because I still had a long road to go to, but I went and I found a counselor. I got a bad counselor first, telling me that children under the age of 5 don't have any memories. They can't hang on to that. I looked at him and I said, you're crazy. This is what happened to me. Well, you're going to have to go see somebody else. So he forwarded me, which was very nice of him, over to a lady in Alpena here. And I started counseling with her, and I met with other women that were going through that. I wanted to counsel with my husband too as well, but he was not interested in that. And I felt like I didn't have his support. What do you got to gain from it? What are you going to do? You know, I wanted to go back to where things happened too. I wanted to deal with things. I wanted to finally get my life together and on track. And so we ended up divorcing, which only brought more hurt into the picture for our children. But I was able to forge forward without feeling like I was pulled back still yet. Like I needed to go forward. So I went through counseling. I ended up meeting my husband, who I have now, Wayne. We were in school together, and we met up again and just started seeing each other. About 10 months into that, he asked me to marry him. Was like the best yes I ever gave, because he had a friend from Word of Life who had invited him to an event there, and he said, you want to go with me? And I'm like, sure, I want to go, let's go. So 2 days after we got engaged, we went to this event, and it was Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames. And there were things going on stage that just were about drinking, and all of a sudden there was just this flood. There was this flood of emotion, and in wondering, you know, are my kids going to be like me? How can I change this? You know, are they going to end up? It was just so much going on that I didn't steer them in right directions, and the different things that were portrayed on there were like a child saying, "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be like you," and I'm thinking, oh, I've really done some damage and didn't even realize it because I was so selfish at that time. It was all about me protecting me doing what I wanted to do. It was, you know, me trying to claim who I was when I didn't really know who I was in God anyways. He had better plans for me, and I just didn't know it at that time. So that night, with all of that emotion rushing and the vividness of the memories rushing and the way I was and who I still really was down deep, and it needed to change the rest of the way. You know, I was working on it, but I didn't know the Lord. My parents took us to church, but we bounced to churches, and I didn't have a solid foundation in who Christ was, and I didn't have a personal relationship with him. So I went forward. Actually, Wayne and I both at the same time raised our hands while we were hanging on to each other's hand. The other one went up, and it was like, when we stood up together, he's like looking at me and I'm looking at him, and it's like, wow, we're doing this together. And so we went forward, and it ended up being we were right behind the guy who was there to help pray with people who actually invited him. So he got to see that, you know, and he was so excited, and we were excited, but your tears were coming, and it was just a release at that point to be able to say, Lord, I'm going to start living for you because I need you. I needed you back then. I didn't even realize that the Lord was trying to walk with me, and I just was pushing him aside and pushing him aside. You know, it's me. I'm going to do it. And I really needed him. So that became our journey. 5 weeks later, we got married. He was willing to go with me and walk through the steps of healing and to be there and pray with me too and help me to see what the Lord had for me. So we got married at the end of May, and in September, he talked with my dad, and my dad gave him directions, and we went back to Ohio. And when we got to Ohio, we had address for the house, and I'm looking at the house, and I said, that's it. And he said, but that's not the right address. I said, I know that's the house. And we called my dad, and he's like, well, numbers may have changed. So we went up and we knocked on the door, and I just knew it. And all I could say is, I'm Charmaine. And the guy on the other side was like looking at us. And Wayne says, she has a lot of things to deal with. And he said, come on in. Come on in. God put that man there. He had had some stuff to deal with his dad, he said, and I understand where you're coming from. I know the Lord put that man there. And we got to go through every room in that house. And when we went into each room, if there was a problem, I could just feel a flood. I could see pictures. I knew the smells came back, the sounds came back, the whole feeling of just being taken advantage of came. And Wayne would stand with me, and the gentleman would move on to the next area and wait for us as Wayne prayed over me, walking through it and letting me know that the Lord was there with me. And I was able to walk through that home and do that everywhere that came about a moment. I dealt with it. And we even went outside, and there were times outside that I was abused, and we walked through those areas. And it was amazing. Each time it was a new release. It was a new release. More and more, and I felt more and more weight coming off of my shoulders. And we stopped by this gate, and Wayne said this really long prayer over me, and it was like, yes, this is happening. I'm able to stand, and I'm strong because the Lord is walking with me, and I'm able to handle this. And I am forging forward. I'm no longer going to be who I was. So we had gotten into the vehicle. We asked the gentleman if we could take and go to the store and get a disposable camera. The home was built by my family, so my dad was curious, you know, can you take some pictures? So we did. We went to the store, and Wayne says, I'm going into the store. And when I go into the store, he said, I have one thing to ask you. He says, can you please give this the rest of the way to the Lord? Because he's been wanting to carry it for you for a long time. So when he went into the store, I said to the Lord, I've had enough. It's for you to take it and help me and make me strong. And I'm giving it to you. I don't want it anymore. It has done enough destruction in my life. What Satan meant for evil, the Lord has turned around, and he's using for the grace and good of anybody else that needs to hear this. And I know that now. You know, it takes a while to get strong and to work through things. And I still had steps to take, but I was on a journey that was so much more better and so much more peaceful than it had ever been before. And now, as I've worked on, I came to the point where I knew I had to ask for forgiveness because I had done so much damage, thinking that I was doing everything for myself and it was not about anybody else. But I'd done so much damage to my children, to even, you know, to my parents with negativity and the way things were. So I told the Lord, you know, I have a hard time face to face with that. He said, write everyone letters. So I sat down and I just started, and I wrote one to my kids, each of my kids. I wrote one to each of my parents. I wrote one to each of my siblings, because the way I acted, even when they were growing up, sent them wrong messages. Or maybe I was too protective over them, you know, and I caused fear in them. There's so much that can happen when you don't realize what you're doing. So I did that. And then I also had to forgive my abuser. And I didn't get to face him face to face because he had already passed away. But that was okay, because I dance in victory now, because I forgave him. And then I had to forgive myself, which sometimes is still hard because you think about all the damage you did. But I know that the Lord has forgiven me. I gave all of that to him, asked him, I repented, asked him for that forgiveness. I know he gave it to me. But sometimes Satan still wants to dig in and, you know, try, but he's not going to win. I know that. I know where I stand. I have Christ. So it's like the joy of the Lord is my strength.